Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Juvenile Justice Policy CRJU 303A. Today, we're going to be discussing the interplay between juveniles and the police. By the end of today's lecture, you should be able to discuss the importance of police discretion, compare official and unofficial procedures, understand why officer training matters, describe police-school liaison programs, and explain how community policing affects relationships among police, schools, and juveniles. Police discretion refers to the authority of officers to decide how to handle a situation, especially when the law or policy does not dictate a specific course of action. Many situations officers face are ambiguous, and discretion allows them to decide whether to arrest, issue a warning, or refer a juvenile to community programs. Discretion is necessary, but can be inconsistent, and officers may be influenced by various cues. These cues include the wishes of the complainant, the nature of the violation, the juvenile's demeanor, prior police contacts, parental cooperation, the setting of the encounter, the age of the officer, and applicable laws or ordinances. The complainant is the person who reports the offense or problem to the police. The demeanor of the juvenile refers to how the youth behaves during the encounter. Minor offenses in cooperative juveniles are often handled unofficially. Unofficial procedures are informal police actions, such as warnings or referrals, rather than formal arrests and charges. Serious offenses usually require official action, meaning formal steps like arrest and referral to juvenile court. But police may defer if the complainant does not wish to pursue the matter. Research shows that juveniles who show respect for police, have few prior police contacts, and have cooperative parents are more likely to be handled unofficially. Conversely, juveniles perceived as a threat, associated with delinquent peers, or uncooperative with police are more likely to be arrested. Studies on police-juvenile interactions vary. Some research finds officers generally do not treat juveniles differently based on race or gender. Other studies indicate that race, gender, age, and socioeconomic status can influence arrest decisions. Negative attitudes or hostility toward police, particularly in minority communities, often increase the likelihood of arrest. High-profile cases such as Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown have heightened tensions between youth, communities, and police. These incidents show the importance of sensitivity and cultural awareness in police encounters. Research also shows that juveniles generally have less favorable opinions of police than adults, and this is especially true for African American youth. Girls tend to have low trust in police, particularly when concerned with victimization, which refers to the risk of being harmed or exploited. These attitudes are shaped by racial socialization, prior encounters, and community context. Police training in diversity and cultural differences is essential to improve interactions with juveniles. In some neighborhoods, police beat officers, or officers assigned to patrol a specific area, develop a working peace with youth, allowing minor violations to maintain order. Police face a dilemma: accusations of over-policing in minority communities versus accusations of failing to protect those same communities. Race often plays a significant role at the initial point of contact. Experts suggest arrest should be a last resort to reduce minority overrepresentation in the juvenile justice system. How might discretion, neighborhood dynamics, or past encounters affect a juvenile's experience with the police? How do high-profile incidents shape community trust and perceptions of fairness? In 2012, Trayvon Martin, an African American teenager, was fatally shot by George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida. Trayvon loved playing football and had dreams of working with airplanes, possibly being a pilot. He attended aviation school for half of his school day and was a good student. The Justice Department conducted an independent federal investigation to determine whether Zimmerman violated federal civil rights law when he shot Trayvon Martin. Civil rights statutes are laws that protect individuals from discrimination or abuse based on race, color, religion, or national origin. Federal investigators examined whether Zimmerman acted in a threatening manner, towards Martin because of his race or used force unlawfully during their encounter. The investigation reviewed all available evidence, including witness statements, crime scene reports, cell phone data, ballistics, and medical reports. Investigators also conducted 75 independent witness interviews and consulted a biomechanical expert to assess Zimmerman's account of the struggle and the shooting. The investigation was separate from Florida's state prosecution. Federal authorities monitored the state trial and paused their active investigation to avoid interfering. After Zimmerman was acquitted in state court in 2013, federal investigators resumed their review. The federal team determined that the high legal standard required to prove criminal civil rights violations beyond a reasonable doubt could not be met. The Justice Department announced that they would not pursue federal criminal charges against Zimmerman. Officials emphasized that this decision did not condone the shooting or minimize the loss of Trayvon Martin's life. The case sparked national dialogue about race, civil rights, and policing practices. By way of information, in 2013, Zimmerman's estranged wife called 911 to report that Zimmerman had assaulted her father and was threatening her with a gun. Zimmerman was not charged. In November of that same year, Zimmerman was charged with a felony aggravated assault after he allegedly pointed a shotgun at his girlfriend during a domestic violence incident. That case was dropped. In January 2015, Zimmerman was again charged with domestic assault after allegedly throwing a wine bottle at a different girlfriend. The charges were again dropped. On December 4, 2019, Zimmerman sued the Martin family and others involved in the trial for $100 million on the grounds of false evidence and abuse of process. The suit was dismissed by a judge in February of 2022, who found no evidence to support any of his claims. On February 18, 2020, Zimmerman filed a defamation lawsuit for $265 million against Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. The suit was dismissed in February of 2021, and the judge said Zimmerman failed to sufficiently allege an essential element of defamation. Police officers have several options for handling juveniles involved in delinquent activities. Unofficial procedures are informal actions that do not involve arrest or court process. Examples include simply releasing the juvenile and submitting a juvenile card to the probation office or police department, reprimanding the juvenile and releasing them, or taking the juvenile into custody for a station house adjustment. A station house adjustment, also called a street corner adjustment, is an informal resolution conducted either at the police station or on site where the juvenile is released to parents after a minor offense is addressed without formal court action. For example, if juveniles are found on private property refusing to leave, police may simply instruct them to leave, or they may bring the juveniles to the station to meet with their parents and agree that the behavior will not continue. Informal adjustments can also involve minor arrests or violations of previous adjustments, which may be documented but are not considered formal court actions. In some states, these adjustments are partially formalized. For instance, in Illinois, a juvenile may be required, with parental consent, to perform community service or make restitution for damages. Although informal adjustments are often seen as beneficial for the juvenile, there are legal and ethical concerns. Because the juvenile has not been adjudicated delinquent, meaning the court has not determined guilt, any punishment or treatment imposed by the police is technically unauthorized unless the juvenile or parents consent voluntarily. Voluntary consent may be questionable if the threat of official action exists, creating a coercive situation. Improper informal adjustments can upset juveniles, parents, and even the juvenile court system, though well-handled cases with proper referrals can resolve minor delinquencies successfully. Police procedures for abused or neglected children are more restricted. Abused or neglected children are minors who are harmed or insufficiently cared for by their guardians. Police are mandated reporters, meaning they are legally required to report suspected abuse or neglect to child protection agencies. Investigators from the Children and Family Services Unit typically contact the involved parties within 72 hours. If abuse or neglect is confirmed, the child may be taken into protective custody until a court hearing can occur. Major law enforcement agencies often have specialized staff for investigating crimes against children, separating enforcement duties from protective services. Child abuse, including assault or sexual abuse by caregivers, is both a criminal matter and a child welfare concern. Police must ensure that the safety and well-being of the child while investigating objectively. Arrests of abusive parents are rare, usually occurring only in severe cases or when there is immediate danger. Even with mandated reporting laws, officers may hesitate to take formal action due to concerns about false allegations or misuse of reports in hostile family situations. Research indicates that most police juvenile contacts are resolved informally. The proportion of child abuse or neglect cases handled informally is unknown but likely significant. Some officers prefer informal dispositions because they avoid creating juvenile records or detaining the child, and officers often believe they are acting in the best interest of the parties involved. However, informal procedures have inherent risks. Police may make mistakes, juveniles and parents may benefit from formal treatment, and judges often cannot track repeated informal encounters. This highlights the importance of proper training, oversight, and awareness of the limits of police authority in handling juveniles and child abuse cases. Official procedures for handling juveniles are clearly defined in juvenile court acts. Juvenile court acts are laws that establish how juveniles are processed through the legal system, emphasizing treatment, protection, and rehabilitation rather than punishment. Police procedures for juveniles differ from adult procedures and require specialized training to ensure proper legal handling. Juvenile officers are law enforcement personnel specifically trained in juvenile law, adolescent development, and available social services. Despite the importance of juvenile officers, many initial contacts with juveniles involve patrol officers. Therefore, minimal training in juvenile law for all patrol officers is critical to safeguard juveniles' rights and support effective legal processing. Juveniles are afforded the same legal protections as adults, including protection against self-incrimination and unlawful searches and seizures. In addition, juveniles often receive enhanced legal protections. For example, police must notify a juvenile's parents of the child's whereabouts and generally release the juvenile to parental custody unless there is a good cause for detention. Detention in adult facilities is often illegal, and juveniles must be kept separate from adults by sight and sound when detained in the same building. Juvenile records are typically confidential and maintained separately from adult records. Fingerprints and photographs may be taken, but are often restricted in use, sometimes requiring a court order for release. Juveniles charged with delinquent acts may also have a right to legal counsel during procedures such as police lineups. Miranda rights apply to juveniles, but the validity of a waiver may be questionable without a parent or attorney present. Police may delay interrogation until a parent or attorney is available. Juvenile officers are responsible for ensuring that juveniles are properly handled, according to these official procedures. These officers are specially trained in juvenile law, procedures, and adolescent development to carry out their duties effectively. For the last 75 years, scholars and practitioners have repeatedly called for the professionalization of police through increased education and training. Professionalization refers to the development of specialized skills, knowledge, and standards for law enforcement officers to perform their duties effectively. The number of criminal justice and law enforcement programs in colleges, as well as special institutes, seminars, and workshops, has grown dramatically over the past 4 decades, and some institutions are requiring a 2 to 4 year degree program before applying. Because juvenile cases present unique challenges, training for juvenile officers is essential. Juvenile officers are sworn law enforcement personnel specially trained to handle cases involving minors, including delinquency, abuse, or neglect. In large metropolitan police departments, the number of trained juvenile officers has increased, and promotion within juvenile bureaus provides recognition and incentives for career advancement. In smaller cities or rural areas, the situation is more difficult. Some departments have no officers trained specifically for juvenile matters, and those assigned may lack prior training. Juvenile officers are often expected to speak to civic groups, run junior police programs, visit schools, coordinate with social service agencies, and investigate cases involving abused or missing children. Without proper training, officers may be ill prepared to handle these responsibilities. In Illinois, a juvenile police officer is legally defined as a sworn officer who has completed basic recruit training, has been assigned as a juvenile officer, and has completed the required juvenile officer training approved by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board, or, for state police, the Director of the Department of State Police. This formal training ensures officers meet statutory standards and professional expectations. Training is ongoing because juvenile crime evolves over time. For example, social media has introduced new challenges, such as juvenile sexting and cyberbullying. Juvenile sexting involves minors sending or posting nudes or semi-nude images of themselves, and cyberbullying is bullying conducted online or through text messages. Police officers and prosecutors face increased pressure to handle these cases effectively. Undercover investigations are one method officers use to prevent and respond to online offenses. Investigations may involve officers posing as minors or adults online to detect sexual exploitation, child pornography, or cyberbullying. Research indicates that online juvenile prostitution cases often involve younger minors, and that officers are more likely to treat these juveniles as victims rather than offenders. Continued education and specialized training are therefore essential for juvenile officers to respond to evolving types of juvenile crime effectively. De-escalation refers to methods used by law enforcement to reduce the intensity of potentially violent or aggressive situations, minimizing harm to all parties involved. One of the earliest training programs for juvenile de-escalation was the De-Escalating Juvenile Aggression for Law Enforcement Only curriculum. This curriculum was designed to enhance officers' ability to mentally, verbally, and physically calm aggressive or potentially violent youth in a quick and safe manner. The curriculum has been recognized nationally and internationally for its effectiveness. More recently, Alsma, Schwartz, and Tu in 2018 evaluated the Policing the Teen Brain program, a police training initiative aimed at improving officer-youth interactions and reducing juvenile arrests. Their study found that officers who completed the training demonstrated improved attitudes toward juveniles and felt significantly better prepared to implement de-escalation techniques. This is particularly important because officers' uncertainty in responding to juveniles can contribute to negative outcomes, as juvenile encounters are often more ambiguous than adult encounters. In 2017, the International Association of Chiefs of Police released Enhancing Police Responses to Children Exposed to Violence, a toolkit for law enforcement. This toolkit provides guidance on-scene protocols addressing children's traumatic stress, responding to domestic violence situations, and supporting youth with mental health challenges. The goal is to prevent secondary victimization of youth and allow police officers to serve as supportive figures rather than exacerbating trauma. Secondary victimization occurs when victims of a crime or trauma experience further harm through the response of institutions or authorities. The Chicago Police Department developed the Crisis Intervention Team for Youth, or CITY, a 5-day training course designed to help officers respond to youth with mental, emotional, or behavioral disorders. CITY is based on the Memphis model of crisis intervention training, or CIT, which has been used nationally for 2 decades. Unlike the adult version, CITY focuses on identifying juveniles in crisis, assessing their risk of harm, and using de-escalation techniques to reduce trauma for the juvenile, officer, and family members. The program aims to divert youth in crisis from the justice system to community-based mental health services, emphasizing safe officer-youth interactions. These programs reflect an increased recognition within law enforcement of the unique challenges posed by troubled youth. They provide officers with practical tools distinct from traditional adult crime responses. However, The long-term effectiveness of these programs in the community is not yet fully known, highlighting the need for multi-year and multi-site evaluations to assess outcomes and identify areas for improvement. Police officers are the primary source of referral to juvenile court, meaning they're the ones who initially bring cases involving juveniles to the court's attention. Juvenile court judges rely heavily on information provided by the police about the juvenile's background, prior behavior, and circumstances surrounding the incident. However, the goals of the police and the court can differ. For example, police officers may focus on control and order, whereas juvenile courts are guided by treatment, protection, and rehabilitation. These differing goals can sometimes result in decisions that are not in the best interest of the juvenile. At times, a juvenile court may become overly concerned with control rather than rehabilitation, and police officers who perceive the court as either unfair or too lenient may decide not to refer certain cases to the court, believing that nothing will be gained by official action. Additionally, heavy-handed tactics during police interviews or interrogations may produce false evidence, especially when juveniles are particularly vulnerable due to age, intellectual disability, or mental illness. In some cases, police may attempt to resolve matters independently, outside the court system, through informal adjustments. While this may seem expedient, it may not always align with the juvenile's best interests. Police departments and schools have developed programs aimed at preventing juvenile delinquency and improving relationships between youth and law enforcement. These programs go beyond merely providing security. They aim to foster positive interactions, provide counseling, improve communication with school staff, and increase student understanding of the law and its consequences. Police School Liaison Officers, or PSLOs, often called School Resource Officers, SROs, are officers assigned to schools. They serve as counselors, sources of information, and law education resources for students. While SROs are often partially funded by school districts, they remain employees of police agencies. Research indicates a challenge for these officers, balancing authority with the role of counselor or confidant. Following recent school shootings, there have been calls for more armed SROs. While armed officers provide security, studies suggest they have limited impact on reducing school-based crime. However, SROs still offer valuable services. They become familiar with school layouts for emergency response, train staff in crisis response, and act as visible deterrents to violence. SRO programs have generally received positive evaluations from school officials, though not always from students. These programs aim to strengthen relationships between police and youth in non-threatening situations, thereby improving the police's image, uncovering abuse or neglect, and potentially reducing delinquency. SROs also assist with educational programs on topics such as bullying, internet safety, legal aspects of dating, and drug and alcohol use. As we discussed the DARE and GRADE initiatives earlier in the text, I'm not going to review those again. Please be sure to review your notes from the last course, as well as reading this section of the book in detail. What is important to remember is that cultural sensitivity is important in these programs to address race, gender, and cross-cultural factors when educating youth. Community-oriented policing, COP, is a law enforcement strategy in which police and community members work together to identify and solve problems, sharing responsibility for maintaining order and safety. While COP is a broad policing philosophy, it is particularly relevant for police work with juveniles because it emphasizes collaboration with schools, probation offices, neighborhood organizations, civic groups, and political bodies to proactively address youth problems, rather than responding solely after incidents occur. Youth-focused community policing, or YFCP programs, often sponsored by the Department of Justice, are examples of COP initiatives aimed at juveniles. These programs facilitate information sharing and proactive partnerships between police, community agencies, and youth to identify and address juvenile problems. In 2011, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP, created a website providing resources for YFCP programs. One example of a YFCP initiative is the Tallahassee Police Athletic League, or TAL-PAL, TAL-PAL. TAL-PAL pairs young people, ages 7 to 17, with police officers and community mentors through recreation and educational programs. The goal is to build long-term positive relationships between youth and law enforcement through mentorships and engagement. Another example is SHOCAP, or Serious Habitual Offender Comprehensive Action Program, implemented in Alachua County, Florida. SHOCAP targets juveniles who have been repeatedly charged or convicted of law violations. Selection for the program is made by a multidisciplinary panel including law enforcement, juvenile justice, counseling agencies, and attorneys. The program monitors 30 juveniles at a time, aiming to deter repeat offenses and maintain school attendance. SHOCAP allows for immediate arrest of probation violators in the program, whereas juveniles not in SHOCAP can only have a probation violation filed through the court and a probation officer. By using multidisciplinary integration and information sharing, programs like SHOCAP improve coordination among agencies and help ensure informed decisions about juveniles who repeatedly engage in delinquency. The overall goal of COP and related programs is to intervene early, strengthen community ties, and reduce repeat juvenile offenses. In conclusion, police-juvenile relationships remain strained, but efforts are increasing across the country to bridge the gap. I'll see you in Chapter 7.